Jenkins, College of Education, and this is my colleague, Dr. Pogue, also in the College of Education. And we're going to talk this afternoon a little bit about what we call poetic justice and why teaching poetry in the classroom is important. I thank you all for being here. That says a lot to those of you who are in the room who would come out and hear this. So I appreciate you being here, okay? All right, one of the things I want to bring out is a quote from Walt Whitman. And he said, "We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race. And as members of the human race, all humans have passion." That's to let you know that poetry, as well as other genres of literature, are all a reflection of our communication with each other, between each other, and with other cultures, because we're passionate. That's the type of people we are. That's how we were made. So it's a form of communication, so you can communicate your feelings, your expectations, everything. And poetry is just one way that we do that. We do that, I see some of you texting. Some of you do it by writing letters. It's also a lost art. You're talking to each other through the telephone or through other type of media. So poetry is a matter of a form of communications. Okay? Next slide.
Okay, hopefully the video will populate in just a moment. But there are a lot of different people who we associate with poetry. Maya Angelou is probably one of the most famous that we what we're going to do is pull it up from YouTube since it won't embed right.
And while we're pulling that up, know that we chose this one because it speaks to our passion as a people. It speaks to us as human beings. And one of the things poetry does is it helps us to express in a different language, in a different style, things that we feel are important and have to be spoken. And that's what poetry is, like other genres. Like a play is written to be performed, a poem is written to be performed as well.
Everyone in the world has gone to bed one night or another with fear or pain or loss or disappointment. And yet each of us has awakened, risen, somehow made our ablution, seen other human beings, and said, "Morning, how are you? Fine, thanks, and you?" It's amazing. Wherever that abides in the human being, there is the nobleness of the human spirit. Despite it all, black and white, Asian, Spanish, Native American, pretty, plain, thin, fat, vowed or celibate, we rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom just 'cause I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like suns and like moons, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just 'cause I laugh. As if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words. You can cut me with your lies. You can kill me with your hatefulness. But just like life, I'll rise. Does my sexiness offend you? Oh, does it come as a surprise that I dance? As if I have diamonds at the meeting of my thighs. Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak miraculously clear, I rise. bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave. And so, naturally, there I go rising.
Wanted to show that to give you an idea of the passion that we keep talking about, the emotions, everything that was in that poem. Some of you may be familiar with. It was to arouse something in you. It was supposed to speak something to you. And whatever it spoke, that's what it spoke. What has happened with us teaching poetry and really appreciating it? And why is it important to teach poetry? What we saw from that small clip is a small indication. There is something in that poem that I will always, experience and always, I touched the thingamajig, sorry about that. I will always relate to, because it spoke to something, a struggle that I had as a person of African American experiences. But it didn't have to be just African Americans. The poem itself, to me, spoke about any struggles that any culture may have and the attitude that some take to sustain themselves and to get through it. Regardless of how you treat me, regardless of what I have to go through, throw any slings and arrows you want to, I have determined that I'm going to rise above it. That's what the poem was for me. If I ask you the same thing, what did it mean to you? I should get different answers because of your different experiences. So some of the reasons why we think it's important to teach poetry is because, number one, we learn to appreciate the literature itself. Although the language is a little different from a story or a narrative, it may be a little different from a song, it's still a type of communication. It's a type of literature. So we want you to understand it, we want you to appreciate it, we want you to embrace it. We want you to enjoy it. That's one of the reasons why we teach. Another reason why we do it from a diversity perspective is, if you notice from that particular one, it spoke to a particular culture. It helps others who may read it to understand maybe something a little bit different about the background, the upbringing, the struggles, the way that African Americans view things. That can happen with another type of poem from another person of another ethnicity. It helps us to understand some global things because we are going to be closer to each other now that we have the technology to do so. So we need to understand the type of people we're working with, the type of people we're communicating with. What is it that has shaped them and their attitudes or their perceptions the way they have? That's another good reason why we study poetry. That gives a voice to those people. Let's say, for example, I'm new in this country. I'm trying to find my identity. And I don't mean to pick on anybody, am I losing my Hispanic identity as I'm trying to figure out my American identity? Poetry is a way that I can bridge both of them. I can speak through poetry of, this is what I have encountered as a Hispanic. This is what I've encountered as someone trying to merge into this culture. Now, who am I? Am I American Hispanic, Hispanic American, or just Pat? Poetry helps us to find those voices and identify them and to voice it to others. Am I?
No, I just wanted to add, in talking about a diversity perspective, how many of you are familiar with the term ELL students or ESOL students? What does that mean?
They're kind of transitioning to like English.
Very good. And so poetry is one of those things teachers can use to allow students to begin to bridge two different languages. So we call it hybridization of language. Can happen easily with poetry. So you allow students to merge the two languages in one piece, so it helps our ELL or our ESOL students. Okay.
And what about social justice?
Social justice. So if you
That's her thing.
know me, social justice is my thing. So poetry is a very powerful lens for social justice. It's a way we communicate, as Dr. Jenkins said, we communicate ideas and passions through the poetry. How many of you are familiar with the Black Arts Movement? Not enough of us, right? We heard of the civil rights movement and the black power movements, right? Did you know we had a movement about black arts at the same time even? So these were writers, sculptors, painters, who all came together, and the mission was through the art to assert one's identity, right? So we have all these, black people are different, right? We talk about black people like we're all the same. We're not. We're not a cultural monolith. But during the black arts movement, there was an argument that we have certain things that do unite us as a people, right? Like being on time for stuff is kind of difficult. Right? So we have certain things that unite us. And so Larry Neal was one of the first people to write about the black aesthetic. And he said that there are ideas about black beauty, about black art that exist. And they use their art to really assert their humanity in a world that didn't want to recognize it. Right? So we have the black arts movement. So that's your homework. I want you to just Google the black arts movement. It's a wonderful, very beautiful, very powerful period in black history that I don't think we study enough in U.S. schools. Because if we knew more, let me rewind. Molefe Asante said for African people, he's talking about all African people, us included. For African people, there is no such thing as art for art's sake. That gives me chills. What does that mean? There is no such thing as art for art's sake. Somebody tell me what they think that means.
Don't be shy.
Come on, talk back.
There is no such thing as art for the sake of art.
Huh? There is no such thing as art just for art. Anybody want to help you, brother? There's no such thing as art for art's sake.
What's the purpose of art?
That's not what he argued. He said for African people, it has a purpose, right? It doesn't exist just because. So we don't read poetry just because. We don't write poetry just because. I'm a literacy scholar. I will tell you that there is no such thing as a neutral text. Everything that you read, the billboard next to the highway, your syllabus, your textbook, what your professors have assigned you, every author has an agenda. They are trying to convince you of something. And so Molefe Asante said, that's how Africans create art. If we're writing poetry, we're trying to sell something to you. An idea, an aesthetic, a value, a moral. Does that make sense? So poetry then has the power to really change the world if we use it the right way. Do you believe that? Anybody disbelieve that?
Anybody out there?
Do you believe that?
I believe it.
That poetry can change the world? Can you think of an example? If Professor Andre was in here, what would you say? If he asked you for an example. How does poetry change the world? Can you think of an example?
The lady kept saying, still I rise through all those struggles. I'm sure that can inspire people.
Right, it can inspire people. Can it do anything else? How about it can grow language, right? Because, see, you're not old enough to know this. Bling is a new word. Where did it come from? And I don't even like it. Where did it come from?
So is swag.
Right, hip hop is poetry.
That's poetry.
And it grows the language because bling did not exist before Lil Wayne rapped about it. You know, back when he was with Cash Money for real, for real. You remember that song? Y'all might not remember that song because I'm dating myself. But poetry can literally change the world by inspiring people, motivating people, sharing passions, and growing language. Like, I don't know if you think about how powerful your culture is, that it can literally change a language. People talking about eyebrows on fleek and stuff. Y'all did that. Right? That's the power you have, and a lot of times it's communicated through the poetry.
And I think another piece in that is that's what poetry should do. It should also shock us. It should offend us. It should refresh us. It should inspire us to go beyond ourselves. You guys say thinking outside the box. Sometimes I just want people to get near the box before they even try to think outside of it. So what happened? You know, we start school with the nursery rhymes and we love them and we sing them and we jump rope to it, make up our own song. All of that was poetry. But by the time you get out of second grade, you started hating it. What happened? Anybody have any ideas? Think back when you were, well, what we found in literature, go ahead, I'm sorry.
How can poetry be judged when it's what we feel? That's what a lot of complaints are in the class.
Okay.
Like maybe that's why people have gravitated away from it.
But why way back, and I agree to some extent, because I don't know the person, but I agree that there may be a problem with that particular situation. But think back on when you were in elementary school. There's something that happened between preschool, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. By then, we lost it.
I think that's one of the problems. I like for students to recite poetry, but I have an agenda. And your generation, you millennials, you like to know why. Otherwise, you can't feel it. If I tell you to recite something, it's just feeling, why she wants to get up here and say this mess in front of everybody, and I don't feel like, what? That's a waste of time. But if I tell you, I want, in teacher education, for example, I like for my students to recite things. One, because I'm trying to, your memory is like a muscle. The more you use it, the bigger it grows. But the other thing is for elocution. Anybody know what that word means? Elocution. What do you think it means?
That's a $10 word now, so make sure you get that so you can use it again.
Articulation. Articulation and enunciation. What is that? How you say things, right? So if you listen to me when I'm teaching my students, and it's not a camera on, I'm real country. Real country. It's important that we learn to speak from our diaphragm and that we speak clearly enough for any student way in the back to hear what we're saying. So if I have my students recite something, it's so that we can practice elocution and enunciation. So if I told you that, then it makes more sense why I would have you reciting something. But if I just have you reciting something without explanation, then that's where it gets a little iffy, for me anyway. Right?
And so that's why we wanted to ask you those things, because we believe, and the research bears us out, that it's partly the teacher's fault as to why you've lost that zeal, that passion for poetry. Because number one, you found it boring. You didn't understand why we have to analyze every itty bitty line, and how did the teacher know what this meant? Have you ever been there where you had to analyze a poem and you found out what the answer was? I found out the teacher had a teacher's edition. That's how they knew that's me. So you found it boring. As a matter of fact, and let me refer to my notes. This was a survey of the public participation in the arts, and this survey was done in 2015, and they found that poetry reading knitting. 50% of those who did the poetry reading found that knitting was more enjoyable than poetry reading. So it's been a steady decline over the past 10 years, and that's why we think it's our fault, partly. When we were growing up, we had the little games and things associated with it. We had little stories. As a matter of fact, your first few years of early learning, early schooling, you were doing just narratives. Everything had a story to it. And so you got overused to that. Then you had to think outside that type of frame, and that made it much more difficult. So, but no one has shown you that it's really a powerful form of expression. I want to share something with you. And I remember teaching 7th grade. I had this little booger. His name was James. James had difficulty with anything related to language arts. I finally got through to James when I told him, James, write whatever you want. We're doing a literary little magazine, whatever you want to write. So James, knowing that whatever he wrote had to be performed, with the enunciation and all of that come into play, because that's what it meant, to express your emotions, to express something, to get something out of you, okay? So this is James' poem. The thunder roared, the lightning flashed, a tree fell over, and a frog got smashed. That's all James wanted me to get out of it, a little chuckle. I said, you got an A. I never had a problem with him again. But the whole idea is it's something he enjoyed, it's something he wrote, it was his expression. He didn't have to analyze anything, he just had to give me a poem. So how do we engage you and elevate your enjoyment? First of all, we don't do the things where our desires overpower what the lesson is really all about, what the poem is all about. That's one thing we shouldn't do. We need to be able to allow you to be exposed to multiple forms of poetry, so you'll have a broader perspective. We need to be able to allow you to utilize your own power in writing your poems and performing them. We need to show you how to analyze those little things that's in the curriculum we have to teach. Like "Oh Captain, My Captain." Anybody familiar with that poem? I hated that bad boy. But that's what I had to memorize and stand up and learn and say with everybody else. But rather than just teaching you, this is because of iambic pentameter and how the poem flows as to why we look at it that way, we need to show you more than that. And that's a little bit what's been missing. Dr. Pogue, I'm sorry. You want to add?
Well, we were going to do some practice. So, as Dr. Jenkins said, one of the things, how many of you have friends who are teacher ed majors? Were or are?
How many of you work in teacher ed? Dang!
All right, so if you think about the people you know and whether or not they like poetry and now they're teaching someone else, if you have a dislike for something, it's hard for you to get your students energized around it, okay? So one of the problems that happens is teachers who themselves aren't comfortable analyzing text will then just read what the teacher edition says the student should be getting from the poem. And because they don't understand how the publisher reached those conclusions, they have difficulty teaching their students how to reach their own conclusions. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to give you some practice, some activities. How many of you are familiar with Gwendolyn Brooks? All right, extra credit, what HBCU is she affiliated with?
Oh, no extra credit today.
So that's your other homework. Gwendolyn Brooks says she learned to be a black poet when she was at this school. That's a good guess, but no. Here's another hint. W.E.B. Du Bois is also associated with that particular institution.
They don't know.
No? All right. So I'm going to play the video. Unfortunately, it won't play on the screen. I wanted it to play while you look at these notes. But how many of you are familiar with her poem, We Real Cool? Anybody?
We real cool. Say what now?
Yay. We just watched it before. Okay, so good.
Perfect.
Good. So it's not fresh. That's good.
Maybe
so
the song.
We're going to ask you to analyze the poem. Everybody good with that? We want to get you in the practice of analyzing a poem. Here's some things you can think about while you're watching. What images? So when you read poetry, I had this conversation with my students the other day. When I read novels and poetry and things like that, I'm watching a movie in my head. And they told me that they just see the words. Interesting to me, because I can tell you what the people look like, what kind of smells are around the characters, that kind of thing. I want you to lose yourself in the words. Don't think about, the syllables. I want you to lose yourself in the images of the poem, okay? So think about what you see in your mind's eye. Identify any uses of metaphoric language.
Tell them what that is.
Right, things that mean different things.
This is like this.
The use of white space and punctuation to create rhythm. You're not going to see the actual poem, but I want you to think about how she's saying it, what rhythm may be there. Any situations or experiences the poem makes you think about, and that could be unique to you. So it doesn't have to be something we all have in common. Feelings that the poem elicits. How do you feel when it's over? How does it feel when you're hearing it? And then think about what the author may be trying to get you to feel, okay?
We real cool, the pool players, 7 at the Golden Shovel. We real cool, we left school, we lurk late, we strike straight, we sing sin, we thin gin, we jazz June, we die soon.
we real cool. The pool players, 7 at the Golden Shovel. We real cool. We left school. We lurk late. We strike straight. We sing sin. We thin gin. We jazz June. We die soon.
Analyze it. How does it make you feel? What images did you see? What about the rhythm? Why do you think she made the spaces the way she made the space?
What type of typography? Why do you think she made the space the way she made the space? I feel like you lurk late, you're going out of the house, you strike straight, you might have been doing something you aren't supposed to be doing. So I don't necessarily have any analyzation of it, but
You're analyzing.
well,
That's what you really are. Okay, go ahead.
I think that's about it. I think, I don't know, her typography, the way she set it up is how you felt as a teenager. Like, there were spaces in your life where it stopped at a certain point. It stopped where your friends were, maybe, because that's who you wanted to hang out with.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay.
Now, okay. We're going to volunteer you because you saying 8 yes. So go ahead and co-sign for us.
I agree with what she's saying. And We Die Soon really struck me is because as a teenager, you already know it's going to end. Like the fun and the going through your teenage years are going to end soon. Like once you get 18, you're an adult now. So I think it was just more of when she was in high school and being a kid that's not reckless, but she loved to have fun kind of thing. So I agree with what she's saying.
So you got 2 people who are familiar with the poem who just said, we've never thought about it that way. That's how poetry works.
Yeah.
Because I've never thought about We Die Soon in that way. Anybody else?
Ah, come on. All right.
Of the time period or whatever, like during that time, and like, you know, well, I like imagine it, like when I like read poems, I see it. So like I see like a bunch of guys just at like the pool table, like skipping school, like they said, and like the spaces to me is like they're just straight to the point. Like there's no beating around the bush. Like this is what they do. It's an everyday thing. They really don't care about like their life, and like we die soon. It's like they don't care. You know what I'm trying to say?
I got you.
I'm trying.
All right.
Anybody else?
I know this side does not want to be left out.
Let me give a hint of something to think about before the next person gets voluntold. Look at the date, 1959, what's happening? Civil rights movement is happening, right? We're 5 years after Brown versus Board of Education. What is that decision about? I know you know. Brown versus Board of Education.
Say it louder. Say it proud.
Segregation in schools.
Is made illegal with the Brown movement. So now we've got students who are in schools that are less welcoming than they were before. Now, does that shape what you guys are saying a little bit? Right? See, you are brilliant. You didn't even know it.
And that's all a part of analyzing. You pay attention to those things. You paid attention to the spacing. You paid attention to the year, and you brought what you thought it meant to you based on your experiences.
I kind of think it's kind of like
a little bit more.
I kind of think it's a little bit kind of like a narrative of like how the people, these people who the poem is talking about, how they were thinking about it, the situation that they're in. It kind of reminds me of kind of like a modern rap song or something like that, because he's talking about like the things that they do and how cool they are and all those types of things. And Die Soon part is kind of it kind of like speaks to how much they enjoy what they like to do, because like they'd rather have a enjoyable life and die soon than have one that's like different than what they're doing. So it's kind of
Sounds
cool.
good to me. As a matter of fact, that would have been an engaging activity as part of the class. Take it and make it a rap. Make it a rap song.
Do you know what it means to thin gin? Think about it.
Thin
Why would you
gin.
do that? It's well, and another reason. And another reason. I'm not saying any of that is wrong.
In that sense, I would think that they want to drink, but they don't want to be too drunk to where they can't fight.
Okay, another reason. I'm not.
All of it sounds good. I hadn't thought about
But
that
I
one
have
either.
one that I want you to say.
They're trying to make it stretch out.
That's what I was looking for. Because if you're in high school, you really can't afford, right? You gotta water it down. Yeah, that's the other part. Because you might not. be
Whole lot of
experienced that.
Coca-Cola with that. What about Jazz June? What do you think? Like a club, maybe?
Well, they're at the Golden Shovel.
Jazz June, I would think it's June. Maybe it's June, and then you're going out and you're dancing.
Okay.
Jazz was popular. It's what you listen to.
All right. Do you think all this was happening about that time? It was June maybe, and they would have. I'm just thinking. Okay, finally. So she wait till I got all the way back over there. Thank you so much.
Okay, my bad, sorry. Okay, so when I'm analyzing a poem, I think of people or kids who have like a safe place to go where they do things where they normally wouldn't do. Like we left school, we sing, we thin gin. Those are things they probably shouldn't be doing, but they do it anyway because like they feel comforting at their place.
Okay. Great. And then it's okay to do all of that, and maybe the teacher come back and tell you from years of teaching this or what we've done with it, this is what the traditional interpretation has been, but should not diminish or dismiss your interpretation. That's when we lose engaging in the poetry.
And the
Okay.
teacher should also be able to give you the strategies for analysis. Like I told you to look at the date, think about what's happening in historical context she's writing in, that kind of thing. Gwendolyn Brooks is also associated with the Black Arts Movement. Okay? So when she got to this HBCU you're going to find out about, she was pretty traditional in her poetry. And she said it was the students at the university that helped her understand the importance of developing a black aesthetic. And it was they that taught her to be a black poet. So you guys, students have agency within the classroom. I don't know if you guys, if your teachers allow you to see that, but you really are teachers in the room with us. Like the good learning happens through dialogue and discourse, not one-way banking model of education. All right, so here's another activity we're going to do. Anybody ever heard of found poetry? Yay.
All right, we got something nobody's heard about.
So in found poetry, what you're to do is to locate a poem. Usually it's something popular people are familiar with. Then you're going to take it and you're going to take phrases and words from the poem itself. You're going to rearrange them and add some of your own own phrases and language, and create something new with a new meaning. So it should be partially recognizable because of the things you pulled, but it should be a flip on it because of what you contribute to it. Does that make sense? Good, because you're about to do it.
Remember, that was the traditional way they did it. We're going to take simple nursery rhymes. We did not bring paper.
We did not bring paper.
So you're just going to have to think and be ready to recite your poem. Let me give you a quick example when I sort of did this where you are. You take the title, you rearrange the title, and you rearrange the poem to fit your experiences, but you're maintaining some of the words and phrases out of there, so you still end up with the original understanding of it. I was given Little Red Riding Hood. So I changed it. I'm just going to give you the title because I can't remember anymore. I changed it to Red in the Hood. So that's pretty much what you're doing. Choose one and just be prepared to tell us how you would rearrange it using some of the same words and phrases. You can even change the title and create your poem, your nursery rhyme based on your experiences, but pulling some of the same idea. Okay? We'll give you a few minutes. Ready to give it a whirl? Well, let's just try. Okay? Anyone want to start?
Okay, so
Yeah, come on. Share what you got. Good choice. Well, she's coming with the mic.
I said, Jen and Josh ran to the house because their mom was calling. She wanted them to come back because she was falling.
Okay, cute. I like that. All right, somebody else. I mean, just try it. Even if you hadn't finished, just give us an idea. Okay, go ahead.
I said, oh, sorry.
Which one you take?
Oh, 3 blind mice.
3 blind mice.
Yeah, I said 3 mice are running from the blind farmer.
3 mice are running from the blind farmer?
Yes.
Isn't that interesting?
So what ideas were you guys planning?
Well, I was basing mine off more of like a modern time with Jack and Jill.
Okay.
Because I thought like when Jack and Jill was created, it was like doing like where like, for example, Jack went to fetch the water, but instead of Jill fetch the water, being like stubborn. That's kind of where I was going at.
Okay.
The gender norms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's good.
Thank you.
That's good. See how you just stretch your mind a little differently based on your own experiences. Okay, go ahead.
Jack and Jill. I took Jack and Jill, and I was like, Jack and Jill kissed a bottle, because in college we drink a lot. So I was.
So I
thinking-
heard.
Yeah. So I heard. So I was trying to make a play on word and use the words cradle, like cradle the bottle, and then because some people, I know of some people in college that they may be having a hard day, and so they'll go turn to drinking. So I tried to create a play on words to make it rhyme, but I wasn't very successful.
Oh, yeah, you were.
Oh, but I see where you're going with that with the last part of that poem.
Yeah.
That, you need to finish that.
Yeah. Cradle the crown. Look, cradle the crown royal.
There you go.
That's a thought. It's interesting no one picked Humpty Dumpty. Any thoughts? Let's do one now together. Humpty Dumpty. Homer Simpson sat on. Never mind. I'm just throwing it out there.
Instead of like him sitting on the wall, he could be like at this high place, and his whatever he did caused him to have a great fall. So not necessarily just falling, but like something in his life made him have a great fall, something like that.
Oh yeah.
You see where I'm trying to go? Okay, and that's all I got so far.
That's great. That's great.
I'm going to let you analyze this one like we did We Real Cool, okay? I'm going to read it because it's my favorite. So
One of her
Lucille
favorites.
Clifton was also associated with HBCU. No, but you said it earlier. Yes. All right, so Lucille Clifton, won't you celebrate with me? When Lucille Clifton wrote this, she was dying from breast cancer, okay? Won't you celebrate with me? Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model, born in Babylon, both non-white and woman. What did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. All right, who wants that one?
Okay, so my mother, before I was born, she had breast cancer. Then she survived it. Then 2015, she was diagnosed again, and she was just concluded survivor in March. She finished chemo in March. So, I take with this that she isn't looking as if she's going to die. Because the first time my mom, she was like, okay, I can't die. She just had to get it done. But then the second go round, my sister and myself, my brother, we had to be very gentle with her. And, you know, it was kind of like she had went back to a kid because we couldn't say mean stuff. She was like very sensitive this time, and we didn't understand that as the strong woman she usually is. So it's like Lucille Clifton is taking this, that she's dying from breast cancer, as a positive light. And she's like, I've made my life what it is. Breast cancer is about to take me out, but I'm still going to be positive. I'm still going to be happy for what I have done. So I think that's a very great poem.
Now, the interesting thing is, I'm not sure whether you would have gotten all that if Dr. Pogue hadn't given that tidbit about when she wrote it and what was happening. So that's why that little information about authors that you guys don't even want to read about in the textbook when we're trying to study and all that stuff, that's why we do it. Because there's a connection. Hopefully, you'll find one. Good job.
Anybody else?
Yeah, somebody over there. We're going to get some other fellas to jump in here in a minute. I just know it. I feel it. I feel it. Won't you celebrate with me?
She wants to celebrate, so this is her way of showing that she's been through so much already and she's made it through that, so why not celebrate? Why can't I celebrate this, or why can't you celebrate with me? And she doesn't feel as though she knows that something is going to kill her, but it's not. She's been through so much, so she's not really fazed by it.
Anybody else?
I don't necessarily think she's talking about like the cancer killing her, because when she said, what have I shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. I think what she's saying is that like she made it, like she, like without like guidance or whatever, she still became the person better than what she would have thought to have become, because she said like she had no model. And just like celebrate her for becoming who she is, not necessarily like that, not what becoming who she is, but what she has become. And like the cancer is like not really shaping her life, if you could get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Now I'm going to push you though. I like that. I'm going to push everybody that said something. What if she's not just talking about herself? Who might she be talking about?
The line where it says born into Babylon, both non-white and woman. I think she was talking about her parents, how white people are privileged. So she wasn't born into a privileged family, and she was born to both women, so to speak. And I guess back then in the household, it was expected to be woman and man. That's how a family was supposed to be raised. And it still says, what did she see to be except herself? Even though she doesn't have like, or anybody have the man and woman type, the father leave out of every black family, so to say, she still see that she can still be herself. She made it up, you know, to just still push forward.
Anybody else?
Well, who does she want to celebrate with her?
People like her, non-white women.
I'm sorry.
I said people like her who are non-white women.
Those the only people she wants to celebrate with her?
Oh, my bad.
Oh, no, no. It ain't bad. I'm sorry. Thank you. So she wants other people like herself to celebrate. She wants everybody else to celebrate. What are they celebrating? I'm sorry.
No, she's right there.
I'm trying to get back here.
Okay. I feel as if this poem is like a transition poem from negative to positive.
Okay.
I feel like in the beginning, won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I feel as if at first she wasn't really, what's the word I'm looking for? She wasn't really thinking positive about her life.
Okay.
And I feel throughout the poem, she continued on. She points out all of the negative things that happened. Like she didn't have a model. She was born in Babylon, born a white and woman. But when she gets to this bridge, it's like, okay, I've made peace with who I was. I made peace with the negativity. So let me cross this bridge over and talk about the positive things and what made me positive.
It's amazing that you identified that. So there was this gap where she moved from a place where she didn't feel completely herself to Howard and began to write more about her spiritual self. So there was a change in this.
Well, I feel like she mentioned Babylon. I feel like that's a reference to Christ because like the Tower of Babylon built, it's in Genesis.
That's Babel. The Tower of Babel. It's a little bit different. But you're right,
Yeah,
it's a
but
Christian
Babylon,
reference.
yeah,
It's
Babylon's
Christian.
still mentioned. So I feel like
Yeah, it's a Christian reference.
Yeah.
It's a Christian reference.
okay, so maybe I wasn't right in context.
No, but I'm
We
just saying that
gotcha.
story doesn't work, but Babylon does work. Yeah.
It was mentioned with Daniel.
Yes.
So, so I feel like the bridge may be a path to greatness, like going to heaven, in a sense. I feel like that kind of ties in hand.
I can see that with Star, Shine, and Clay. Yeah, I can see that. Because we are just clay, but Christian belief says that we will shine as stars. Thank you. Like that. Anybody else? Y'all are doing so wonderful. You need to be, oh, it's our turn. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. Thank you for participating. Anything else before we close out? Any other questions or anything? Well, we certainly have enjoyed being here, and we thank you, Professor Hankerson, for inviting us.
Thank you.
And we're just going to, I'm going to turn in my mic.
Thank you, Dr. Pogue.